Well, here is our second lecture video or topic, Exploring Global Business. Why nations trade? Well, the reason that we need so much from other countries is that no single country has the resources to provide everything its citizens want or need. And in America, it's probably much more of a want. So when we look at trading in the global economy, some countries will have something called an absolute advantage. And that's when a nation's ability to produce a product at absolute lower cost, which means they could run the table. They're so good at it that they could put most everybody out of business. They're the dominant player in the world. And for years that has been Saudi Arabia in oil production. I mean, they've got it down as efficient as they want. They have the most barrels of oil in the ground, and they can certainly dictate what price oil wants to be. And I guess you can make the same argument for Australia in wool production, since they breed so many sheep. Now, there's another advantage called a comparative advantage. And the comparative advantage is that it's an ability to produce a product most efficiently versus other products that could be produced. And so every country, by definition, should have a comparative advantage. It's just what you do the best. And you could probably even say that for yourselves. What's the one skill that you have that is the best skill versus the other ones you have? So in the United States, we're very excellent in agriculture and in growing food. And China their manufacturing techniques are the best, and let's hope that does not become an absolute advantage for China. But in the last 30 years, their manufacturing efficiencies and getting that product anywhere in the world has been awfully good. So in theory, every nation can do something the best and has a comparative advantage. Now, I'm looking in at world debt. We have talked previously about our debt in the United States, $30 trillion. So we want to look at what the government debt is versus your GDP. Okay, how much debt versus your gross domestic product that you earn. And most of the countries are in a pretty big problem. Even Japan. Now, this was as of 2018, and if anything, it's just been a bigger increase. Japan is 230%, which means they have 2.3 times amount of debt as they do income. Italy and some of these smaller nations that are in all sorts of problems, basically because they're on the euro dollar in the European Union, and you just can't print out your own currency like the drachmas in Italy. And in Greece, the lira and the drachma could just be printed out pretty easily and to fund any projects or government projects. Now they're tied to the euro, which they get a set amount of that. In the United States, again, we're probably more now at about 100 and maybe 120%, which means 1.2 times the debt to our income. Some other ones that we can see, and for years, even Russia has been very low, which means they have a lot more income than they have debt. And so this is the G20 countries, some of the wealthiest, and there's a lot of world debt out there. And so when we look at things as far as our debt to income, it's not as bad as some other countries. And there's some very small countries that are like 300, 400, 500%, which they just the citizens there just don't have a chance. How we measure international trade? Okay, well, we produce products and services in the United States, and we use them ourselves, and then we see if anybody else wants to use those. So we export. All right, kind of like your sales, so to speak. Well, just for a comparative metaphor, other countries do the same, and they export, which means if we take it in, we import it. So we buy from them. We sell and we buy. Now, we are an economy that's 65% of sales, of consumption, excuse me. And so that's what we are going to look at. Now, we are a country, economy, that we love to buy and purchase. 65% of our economy, right about there, is based on consumerism. So we love imports from countries. So when we talk about that in the context of balance of trade, it is your exports minus the total value of your imports. And so if we're exporting more than we're importing, we would say we have a trade surplus with that country. And each country has its own number. What we trade with China, what we trade with Mexico, what we trade with Canada, those are our biggest trading partners right there. We'll trade with some of the European countries. And if it's a deficit, that means we actually import more than we export. So we're buying more than we're selling. In 2017, we've always run a trade deficit, even since the 1980s. And of course, a lot of that deficit is based right what we're looking at in oil and gas. We buy Canada. It would be our number one, basically, import from Canada is oil and gas, and then Venezuela, and then Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. But we get most of our oil and gas, natural gas that is, from Canada. Then most of our oil from Venezuela, and then we look into the Middle Eastern countries. So 2018, it went to 621 billion. Now, last year, again, we're almost in what we call the big reset, because last year we did not import as much just because of what COVID has done to us. And so going forward, I still think we'll see the biggest trading partners again, China, Canada, and Mexico as the biggest U.S. trading partners, both in terms of imports and exports. We sell to them and we buy from them. Well, a lot of countries, we've always run a deficit. And many other countries, like Japan, have always run a surplus. And there's reasons for that. And one of the bigger reasons that many American corporations have argued for years is that other countries protect their trade balances. They protect their domestic corporations and producers. And the United States is pretty much a free trade country, which means, hey, bring it in, and we're not going to put anything on it to protect it. And how would you protect a product coming into the United States? Or how would you protect the product being made in the United States versus one coming in? Well, you put a tariff on it. Tariff is like a tax. And most countries do this. Now, we don't. So for years, and I should say decades and decades, Japan puts a $10,000 tariff on a U.S. automobile. They did that to our trucks for a long time. Again, these are examples. You may find some differences here. So if you wanted to buy an American car in Japan, and you're going to add an extra 10 grand to that. And so, of course, Japanese technology and engineering has always been very, very, very good. And so it's been very difficult for U.S. automakers to sell abroad, especially in Japan and some European countries. Now, we do not put a tax on Japanese cars. Now, that saves you and I money, because every type of a tax, who pays the tax? Well, it's the consumer that's got to pay it. So all of a sudden, for that Toyota Corolla, which has always tried to be under a price point of $20,000, somewhere around $15,000, you can get a very nice Toyota Corolla, pretty much brand new. Would you now want to pay $25,000 for that Toyota Corolla? All of a sudden, we might start looking at any American-made Ford or Chevrolet or GM small car product versus Toyota, Nissan, etc., etc. Now, Trump tried to put imports on Chinese. Again, it was always a threat. I don't know if we ever really got into heavy importing. Much of it was the threat of that. So other countries would trade more fairly with us. Well, we again, really didn't get to see too much of that because of what we've gone through. Now, it does help protect Chinese and domestic companies with any type of tariff. Now, China pretty much trades pretty well with us, but here's what China does do. They do buy a lot of our debt. And as of a few years ago, they owned well over $1 trillion, maybe even $2 trillion of our debt. So we have to play very carefully when somebody would say, hey, let's just stop importing from China, or let's put a bunch of taxes and tariffs on all Chinese products. Well, do you want to bite the hand that feeds you? And China has been very good about buying a lot of our national debt, and they fund that. So you make them mad, they may say, hey, pay back your debt. And that would be a situation that the United States probably doesn't want to get into. Now, you can do quotas. For a good decade now, since 2007, avocados, and of course in Texas, we love our avocados, we love our guacamole, we love anything that has avocado into it, and we did protect that. Most of the growers of avocados in the United States are in California, and they really, that's their cash crop. They protect the avocado. It's not like you can walk into a field in California, if we have any Californians here in the class, that you could usually get grapefruits and oranges, and most people wouldn't run you off. But I can remember, because my brother lives in California, going around those orchards, just driving through, and there was literally barbed wired fences all around the avocado trees, because those are almost 50 cents an avocado, and you've got just hundreds of thousands of trees growing. That's a big cash crop. Well, in the 2007, the law was lifted that we could have, there was no more quotas from Mexico, avocados from Mexico, which means Mexico could only import so many thousand per year into the United States. Well, that quota was lifted, which means we can get avocados pretty good price. The large Hass avocado ranges from $1 to $2, and it's been doing that. It was the same price you would pay literally for a large avocado like in the early 1990s. So keeping up with inflation, if we did have the quota, would you be willing to pay $4 to $5 to $6 for a large Hass avocado when you can pretty much get it for, in season under $1 or $2 or $3 at Whole Foods for their organic avocados? But I enjoy avocados, and I sure like the price. So again, when you put quotas, you put tariffs, taxes, it's a higher price for the consumer, and the American consumer loves to purchase. Now, the truck market was something that we did protect for decades, and past 10 to 15 years, Toyota has been some of the largest truck sales in the United States. So what Toyota did was, on their Tundra, they're all built in the United States. So they were smart enough to get around it, because any imports of a large truck is taxed very heavily, which is why you just don't see imported trucks directly from other countries. But Toyota and Nissan built manufacturing plants. There's a very large one, San Antonio, for the Tundra, and throughout the United States. So that's what Toyota did. They said, well, we'll have completely owned and manufacturing facilities inside the United States, and therefore we get around all of those extra $10,000 tariffs that the U.S. had put on it. And so there's different ways to manage that. Now, maybe you've heard of embargoes and sanctions. This is when you're really trying to punish a country. And so we're going to ban the import or export of certain products. We're using that political muscle to change ideology. All right, we look at some of the countries that we have been at odds with. Let's put it that way. So Iran, Iraq, Cuba, North Korea, and Russia. Some of those items that we will, if we want to try to get ideological change, nothing can come in. But until we need the oil from Iraq and Iran. Again, it's not every product; it's just certain products. But those are ways to restrict and protect global trade. Now, brick was something that investment houses, investment firms, let's put it that way, in the year 2000. All right, we have a new millennia. So Shearson, Lehman Brothers, American Express, Goldman Sachs, some of the biggest companies around were looking at what's going to be the big players in this new millennium. So they picked 4 countries that they believed that would have the fastest growing population, the fastest growing economies. So we have BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And for the past 20 years, these 4 countries have shown us exactly that they are big in population, their economies are growing, they need a lot of resources, and when you put it on it, these last 10, actually 20 years, it's about 40% of the world's population. And when you look at all those, now those are 4 big countries, their economic input, when you convert it to the US dollar, somewhere around $23 to $25 trillion when combined. So that could be the biggest economy on the global stage. But I mean, they are 4 independent countries. So again, investment companies were saying, what can we do to invest in those areas If they're going to grow, that means people are buying a lot of product. What can we do to take advantage of that? And so it became kind of powerful, kind of a buzzword in the aughts and in the teens. And as we look at BRIC, hey, do a lot of countries even like us, the United States? Well, we're pretty brash, you know. That's how we were formed in war, and we go to war, and we do, as Teddy Roosevelt said in the early 1900s, you know, you talk loud and you carry a big stick. And you just dare someone to try to pick a fight with you. And so that is kind of our reputation abroad. No, they really didn't. In 2009, 2010, they had an official summit, which occurred in Russia. The 4 prime ministers, presidents, emperors of the countries came in, and they were trying, one country, see if you get this, one country said, hey, why don't we not have the US dollar as the world reserve currency? Let's put the Chinese yuan as that. Now, which country do you think did that? Do you think it was China? A lot of people, probably China did. Was it Russia? You know, we've always been at Russia, the Cold War, since World War II. Was it India? Or was it another country? And it actually was our South American brothers and sisters. It was Brazil that entertained that question. Now, there was another country that came up and said, absolutely not. The dollar will remain the world reserve currency. Now, which country do you think that was? It was China. China came to quote our aid, so to speak. Why? Well, just like we said earlier, China owns almost $2 trillion of our debt. So, well, you're maybe saying, well, so what? What would have happened? Here's what would have happened. Look at your bank account. Look at your wallet. If banks don't hold the United States dollar as the world reserve currency, then just rip it in half. Rip your money in half. Divide your bank account by 2. That's probably what would have happened. There's the law of supply and demand. If nobody demands that dollar, then the supplies, you got too many dollars running around, and the value of it decreases maybe by 50%. That's what would have happened, my friends. And we still see this today when anyone talks of devaluation of the dollar, which we're going to look at. We want that dollar to be the best up there, and it has been since 1944. Now, if you study deeply into economics, you're basically looking at most of the world is funding the dollar. And again, these are world banks that, you know, they believe in a crisis, the dollar is the strongest unit of currency out there. And again, so that helps finance a lot of our debt just by them holding our dollars, because they buy dollars and they put them in there as a currency. So we have the US dollars number 1, the euro dollars number 2, the pound 3, the franc 4, the Chinese yuan is going to be number 5, and then the Canadian dollar. But if you ever hear that throughout your life and your career, that hey, you know, something will replace the world reserve currency, the dollar, you may want to try something else, and that's a very possible reason of why Bitcoin and cyber currencies are becoming very popular. In the stimulus packages under Trump, just Trump alone, and then Biden's, you know, he added to what Trump did. We have circulated and printed more dollars than has ever been in the circulation of the world before 2020. And there's a lot of money being flown out there. And again, if there's too much of it, well, we know why inflation is very strong right now. But you could really devalue that dollar. And the way cryptocurrencies work, there's only a finite amount of Litecoins, of Bitcoins out there. That's why they're and they're in blockchain technology, which means can't be very difficult, be near impossible to blow it up, to undermine the system. And so, in some point, you know, it's still a very evolving and emerging form of currency, but it may be one interesting to look at. If you have a PayPal account, it's very easy to buy cryptocurrencies. And again, it's a hedge, my friends. That's what you would use it as. If you think that these right in here are losing value, and you have strong arguments to say that they are, versus certainly in an online world, and where we don't even use cash, you know, maybe to wash your car, We don't use cash as we used to. Does cryptocurrency make sense? It's in an infancy stage, but by the time it becomes very, very popular, you can still always get in, but you may have wished you have gotten in cryptocurrencies very early. Once again, if you got a PayPal account, you can go on there and start looking at cryptocurrencies, and your PayPal account will hold them for you. You have to have an intermediary that actually holds your cryptocurrencies, and PayPal is one. Our trading partners, popping this out, this is pretty much the way it stands today. Total trade, our number one partner is China, and very close is Canada. Sometimes they flip-flop. Again, we get a lot of oil and natural resources from Canada. And then we've got Mexico, Japan, Germany. And you can see we run deficits with all of those major countries, which means we purchase more from them than they do from us.